endure during her pregnancy. And so Laura felt this said the community would really benefit from a stimulating conversation on maternal mental health.
Yeah, I definitely thank you so much for having me, Shirley.
Of course.
I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk about this because it's super important. And I know right now a lot of the headlines are just those that are jarring and that can really throw your nervous system into oversensory, overstimulation. And so I felt like
Yeah.
it's really important to talk about the facts and talk about the numbers and talk about the awareness, but let's also talk about positive ways to actually endure, to get grounded in the midst of things that we can't really control, especially when it comes to birth. Birth is something that's unpredictable in its nature all by itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I'm hearing like a little bit of, there's a sense of passion behind the way you speak about just maternal mental health. And so I'm curious about your own experience and some of the shortcomings, some of the things that you didn't get to understand or learn that was like the struggles along your journey that you can now offer to other women.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I do come from a counseling background, and so I understand like the mental health, the stressors and that aspect, but I think when you are in the mothering role, you try to stay focused in that space. And so for me, my passion comes from such a jarred experience. I started in student affairs and school counseling, but it wasn't until I had my first birth. So my first son is 5 years old now. My first son, I had hyperemesis gravidarum, which is a gestational condition that's like about 1 to 3% of all pregnant women. And it's a condition that's marked by severe dehydration. It's marked by intense weight loss within the first 8 to 16 weeks of gestation. You can lose up to 20 pounds. That's exactly what happened to me, both of my pregnancies. But you lose up to 20 pounds, ketones in your urine, IV treatments. Those are all of the underlying aspects of that particular experience. And at that time, in 2014-15, it wasn't a condition that was really known about. And because I was going through the process of a master's program at that time, I was enduring a lot of stress at the hands of my professors. They didn't even understand that a condition like that even existed. And then you know that there's this archetype of what the Black mother is in the United States. So it was a circumstance where my professors treated the situation like I was trying to cop out at the last minute. I don't know what master's program student is going to say, because I'm pregnant, I'm going to drop out at the last minute. That wasn't my case. But at the end, the long and short of it is that I developed preeclampsia because of the stress, because of not even knowing that this condition was going to affect me so gravely. And I talk about it in my book. So just for you guys, if you are just now signing on, this is my memoir, The Audacity to Finish. And I talk about this extensively in chapter 10. And my passion for it really comes from a lack of awareness. I thought I was a master's educated student. I was going to have all this support. My professors were predominantly women, older women. And so it blew my mind trying to get out of the program. And it's because my mom's a social worker and I had my husband and them supporting me, encouraging me to relieve myself of the program because, hey, millennial gen mom, I have to do this. I have to make sure I graduate on time. I don't want to disappoint the cohort. And so by the end of that experience, I developed preeclampsia. About 32 to 33 weeks, my feet swelled up out of nowhere. And my good friend, her mother's a nurse, and she's like, listen, you need to get checked, your feet abnormal. So long story short, I was induced at 34 weeks, and my first son spent his first week of life in the NICU. And I lived in the Bronx at that time. My son was all the way in Newmark in Long Island. And even that experience from, pumping milk, I had anticipated to directly breastfeed and not understanding the psychological pressures of having to separate from your first child, no skin to skin. This idea that I'm a millennial and racism is like non-existent and this is going to be great. And even though my one-to-one practitioner was amazing, I call her every year for my son's birthday, the rest of the systematic care was subpar, to say the least.
Right.
And so the passion from that experience, and then going into my second birth, again, having the hyperemesis gravidarum, having a preventable near-death C-section, again, an onslaught of emotional experiences, power struggle. This time my practitioner looked like me. She was a Black woman like me,
Interesting,
Yeah, we could get into it. But those experiences really threw me for a loop, and I felt like for millennial gen women, that's like the moniker that I focus on, the generational experience that I focus on through counseling.
Right.
We have so much information, Shirley. We have so much exposure. We have so much knowledge, so much access. But still, I feel like this throat chakra area is kind of like blocked off. We're very independent. We're very informed. But at the same time, I often see that we surrender our power. It's out of fear. Again, I do think that it's the archetypes coming in, the pathology of being Black and feeling like you're not necessarily in control of your own experience, like you can get in trouble. Right. So all those underlying markers is really what informs my passion, really makes me feel like it's important with as much information, as much knowledge that we have, we're still lacking empowerment. We're still lacking. So that's where it comes from. Yeah.
So for anyone who's just tuning in, and for those who aren't aware, one of the conversations that was happening last week was the Black Maternal Health Week.
Right.
And so what that is just a campaign that's led by an Alliance for Black Mothers.
Yes.
It's a week of activism. It's a week of community building, a sense of community building, and a sense of awareness. And so what really that week is about is kind of stepping in and having a deeper conversation on a national level of Black maternal health. Giving us more of like a community-driven opportunity to stimulate some policies, some research, and even some care solutions.
Yes.
And so we thought that it was important to enhance not only Haitians who blog, but the Black community, specifically Caribbean communities, in organizing an awareness around Caribbean maternal mental health. And so Laura stepped in and decided to not only share her own story, but offer some keys to before birth and also postpartum.
Right. And so I saw a question earlier. Someone asked, how do you take back your power? And that's something that I want to address. And going a little bit further into what you were explaining about what the week. So yes, the week is really predominantly about policy making. And so I think when they say Black maternal health, like it's all encompassing. So like the hospital, the healthcare, the sort of the systemic approach to birthing in this country. And so when you talk about the awareness for us as Caribbean heritage people, I think it's really important too to understand that we have a lot of barriers in some instance, in the sense that you're talking about language, you're talking about cultural barriers. And for me, it was super important to talk about this through Haitians Who Blog because, and forgive me, I'm going to speak a little Creole, so if that's okay. Creole, parler Creole, comprendre? Pas un problème? Eh bien, on va parler avec nous sérieux parce que it's a thing of a bit of a cultural disconnect. So let's put it in context, right? In the United States, you have access, you have functionality, you have pretty much the highest scope of innovation, right? You come here, that's not a secret, right? So you're talking about access, and the intention, the belief is that care as well. But when you come from other nations, Tanku en Haiti, you're coming from traditions that are really rooted in certain types of practice, certain types of care. So, on peut dire que même si ou pas gain l'argent en Haïti, c'est pas une situation de racism. Peut-être ou ka souffrir de classe, ou ka souffrir de l'argent, like it's a class system, poverty, etc. might impact your experience. Mais ça pas veut dire que ou pas soigner. Vous comprenez ça me dire ou pas discriminer à cause de couleur ou pas et suffer discrimination. So that is a cultural piece for awareness that a lot of people don't necessarily know. C'est lorsque vous entrez dans ce système-là, ou accouchez ici, ou vous faites de expérience que, oh wow, it's like this? And I'm saying that because genuinely, born here, that was my reaction. And like I explained, education, preparation, all that stuff, it was like, wow. So someone who's coming from Haiti who has like certain cultural practices, you know, in terms of how they prepare for birth. You know, we have practices certain things. Every community is different. Like my family's from Leogan and Cavaillon, so they have their way of, but it's across the board of a sort of care. Maman toujours soigner, li toujours gen support. Mais en États-Unis, it's very different. It's very individualistic. And so for the fact that they had to create, you know, an entire week of awareness brings you into headlights, so to speak, that like structurally something's wrong. So you right,
maternal health is.
right. And so you have all these disconnections. I think the first thing is, again, like when you come into this country with the expectations, the alienation, the isolation, you know, the kind of like breakdown of who's responsible for what. Something like if you have one-to-one care versus group care. This is something that an Haiti, ou gon docteur, ou fini ak sa, ou gon femme sage. That's a little bit more traditional, a little bit more ancient in practice, but like you have a one-to-one care. Here, you might be part of a group, depending on the hospital that you are a part of. So my first birth, I had a one-to-one practitioner, but in my second birth, I had a medical group. And I didn't know all the doctors who were participating. I only knew my primary. But the other women that I came in contact throughout my experience, they just happened to show up because they were part of the group and they were on shifts. So those are some of the pieces that people need to understand. Women, families need to understand when you're talking about addressing a maternal health issue. And I see people asking questions. In terms of paying attention to the separation between what they're used to back home versus what to experience when they're here. So when you were talking about some of the things that I wanted to offer, the first thing that came to my mind when I was thinking about pregnant mothers was breaking it down into different aspects of care, right? So for maternal mental health, I was thinking specifically for, you know, things like postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety and postpartum PTSD, something that I suffered from. Is what are the roots of that? Where does that come from? Isolation, shock, again, cultural disconnection, not being able to speak the language, not being able to ask questions like somebody asked earlier, like how do you take your power back? The whole self-advocacy. How can you self-advocate if you're not really sure about the policies of your hospital?
Right.
You know, so you're talking about an all-encompassing thing of understanding a system. And then why is there a Black piece? Like all mothers matter, everybody's birthing experience matters, but you're talking about a system that's not necessarily in your favor. And that's the hardest part for people to accept, is that yes, we are all human beings. Yes, we are all made to love. Yes, we are all equal.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily what the system that we're living in recognizes, practices. You know, so sometimes people will get upset when you talk about practitioners. You're not talking about practitioners. You're not discrediting OBGYNs. Like I did a 2-part series on reflecting on this on my SoundCloud file. And it's like, it's not about being in your emotions. It's not about attacking or saying that OBGYNs are not great care. You're talking about a system. So you can have a wonderful doctor. You can have a wonderful one-to-one relationship. But again, when you're facing these systematic issues of what the system thinks a Black mother is, either she doesn't know how to speak properly, or if she shows up to an appointment by herself, that means she's single, or, you know, this is her 4th go around and you don't know who the father is. These are all like perceptions. And so when you're talking about like the impact culturally, someone who's not from the United States comes into this and already that's a jolting shock, like, but going to buy sao they involved. It's like you weren't expecting that. Yes. Like for me, when I was going through my second pregnancy, I remember even having my mother, as my husband would go to work, having my mom accompany me, I would still get the looks, you know, from they make sure you're going to go get care, but you're not even aware of the environment has such an impact on your experience. And anybody who's ever been pregnant can tell you that what you feel, your baby feels. So if you're anxious and a little overwhelmed, then you can be sure that that vibration, that energy is really, it can be affecting your child the same way.
So let's take a minute to actually dive into the mental health aspects. So you mentioned
the structure.
The baby feel. So let's give the audience a bit of what are certain mental health concerns that develop when you are pregnant,
Ooh.
or both pre and post.
Okay, so for pregnancy, you can have things like anxiety because, again, if you're stepping into a circumstance where, and this is beyond pandemic, and even when we were putting this together, like I didn't want that to be the frontliner because I think we're all absorbed in that already. But just being pregnant, you're concerned about your due date. If you're going to deliver beforehand, you're concerned about it actually going the way you planned it. You're thinking about lots of different things, but the primary thing that comes to mind for birth is anxiety because it's something that you may not be able to control for the most part. So you're thinking anxiety, stress, worry. Even if it's your first, second, third child, each pregnancy is very different.
Right.
And for postpartum, early postpartum, again, you have this envisionment of it's going to be wonderful, it's going to be calm, it's going to be peaceful. For me, I can say that honestly, the postpartum experience is for the rest of your life. I had a midwife say that to me once, and it made so much sense. So you're really thinking about the first, 2 weeks to, I would say, like the first year of initial adjustment. So stress, you're thinking about sleeping habits, you're thinking about sleep deprivation, you're thinking about body changes. It's all encompassing when you're talking about emotion.
Right.
All encompassing. But I wrote down a couple of things in terms of highlighting that from like a holistic perspective, like an all-encompassing contextual perspective, because I think that it's really hard to think about anxiety without thinking about your environment. It's hard to think about stress without thinking the cultural piece. So if you're pregnant, like I would say the really central thing to do, because you highlighted in the post, and I'm looking off to the side because I wrote down stuff, I want to miss anything.
You're fine, so am I.
Right, and so I really want for women, for families, pour yo comprendre bagay lan, pour yo pas nan sorte de paniquer. So I work with a Sweeney and Myers indivisible self model, and that's a positive psych model for wellness. It's one of my favorite. Yeah, I love it too. I love it too. Yeah, it's so strength centered. You really should focus on your strengths. So you covered the creative self, you covered the physical self with the things that were posted in that post. So if you guys want to reference that after the live is over, you'll see exactly what I mean. But for pregnant mothers and the coping self, which is one of the aspects, I wrote down for leisure. So, upoko akushe, upepare, I would say, listening to as much music as possible. You'd be extremely surprised, maybe not, how powerful unsi compa, whatever makes you feel grounded, calm. And the word grounded means not being scattered, right? We use that word, we throw it around, and sometimes people don't even know what it means. But being grounded is really not in a scattered, frazzled, your central nervous system is overstimulated. So
It's presence.
Right, yes, correct. So it's not this magical thing. It's listening to music, tuning into your emotions, doing body scans. Is there any tightness, in your abdomen area, knees? Obviously, when you're pregnant, you've put on weight, you're already feeling these shifts. But when you're feeling anxiety, when you're feeling tension, when you're feeling worry, those things create, if I could do like a physical body scan, highlights in your body. So you might see in your chest, in your stomach. It might be spleen area, like some people have anxiety, it be bokochok feo mal tout temps. You can have adrenal fatigue, so lots of different things like that. I'd say music. I'd say tap into your inner child. So drawing, painting, watercolors, crossword puzzles. If you're a mental person, crossword puzzles, things that don't necessarily have to do with a responsibility and don't necessarily have to do with something you're going to be judged, evaluated, etc., etc. But crossword puzzles, drawing, you could be in prayer. That's a leisurely thing for some people. You can be in prayer, but not something that's super focused that you're being highlighted for.
Right.
So that's leisure. For stress management, which is heightened within a pandemic, within a circumstance that's completely beyond your control, I wrote down informed care. I think it's really important with all of the information that's coming down the wire constantly, and specifically for a social media attuned generation. Stick to informed care. And I would say specifically in the state, specifically in the city, specifically like I'm in New York, the borough, if you're Brooklyn, Bronx, Manhattan, whatever, what the policies are for that hospital. And so while I'm not necessarily policy heavy, there's many other accounts that have virtual webinars for that have done that for the Maternal Health Week. I'm pro doula. I love doulas. I am pro doula. I think they are, c'est comme si un nouveau take on Femme Sage en Haïti. That's how I think of it, you know?
Right.
And so, again, that cultural piece, lem t'a pas couché deuxième petite moi, maman me dit, na ki doula ou te petite? Pour qui ça ou besoin doula? Ou gen maman, ou gen papa, ou gen marou, so besoin doula. And those are those pieces that you want to challenge. You want objective care. You want someone that's going to come in with that informed piece. Maman pat konnen rien de système l'hôpital. So I'm going to highlight for you guys 4 doulas, their pages, which I think that you could benefit from. So the first one is Ashe Birthing Services. So that's ASHE Birthing Services. And these are predominantly New York, but they're now serving families virtually. And so for your stress management, if you're looking to learn what is happening in a hospital in your environment, I would say that's the best way to go. The second one that I'd recommend is Hija del Sol Births, and she's actually South Florida. But it's spelled HIJADELSOL Births. The third one is also a midwife. She recently became a midwife, but her name is Jessica Diggs, and she's West Coast. She's Cali, and it's JESSICA Diggs, DIGGS, and she's Cali. That's West Coast, and we had an episode together. She's amazing. And then the last one that I'll make reference to is Tiny and Brave, and she's Haitian as well. I've never had direct.
She's Haitian.
Yes.
I love Tiny.
Yeah.
I was thinking. Continue. We'll talk about it later.
Okay. I follow her post, but I've never had direct interaction. The other 3, yes, I've talked to, etc., interacted with. They're wonderful. And so also I want to make caution as you guys are listening to this and as you revisit this later, some may not be taking new clients. Just be mindful that there's an influx already happening, but you want to get your informed care that way. Even if they are not able to help you, they can probably pass you along to either webinars or information. And another one that I want to make mention, her name is Denise Bolds, but it's Bold Doula, BOLDDOULA, but her name is Denise Bolds. If I have to clarify, I can clarify later. Another aspect of the coping self for stress management is reduce the news intake by like 95%.
Drop it.
You already know what's happening.
You already know.
Pay your dessert, right? So you don't want to. It's important that you know if you have other children. Again, I have 2 children. If you want to stay abreast to maybe news cycles, maybe your first child's like 10 and this is the second child. You want to stay informed. Yes, mais faites attention parce que you don't want to develop preeclampsia. And the misperception about preeclampsia is that it's just salt intake or it's a poor diet. It's actually stress induced as well.
Yeah.
And you want to think about us as Black women in cultural context. Stress can be chronic for us. It can be a generational trauma. So be mindful of that. I wrote down, limit your social media engagement, because some posts that you see, even if they have nothing to do with you, they trigger stress responses in your body.
Right.
So if you are tuning into Babyface and, you keep logging on and you're pregnant, like, why jouer? So I have a great sense of, I'm just keeping it real. Like, you're on here, on these social media platforms, you're jumping in this one's comment section, you're getting upset, and tout pa vaut rien pour. Vous comprenez? Wap additionner un stress sous corps qui pas bénéficieux, qui pas bénéficier petit tout. So I know, like, it can sound like an elderly thing, and it can sound a bit, this, but there's some wisdom there, and I think it's really important to protect yourself, to protect your child. I wrote down also, limit the contact with those who promote worry. They can make us panic for no reason. That likes to zing, like I say, zing, that promotes that worry. Escoute al docteur, escoute ceci, escoute cela. Understand that you don't have to necessarily engage in that all the time.
Right.
And then I wrote, because I don't know who's listening and from where, obviously in New York, this might not be, weather appropriate, but if you're in the more warmer regions, for stress management, you could put your feet in the earth to get grounded.
That feels good.
Yes, the earth has so many minerals. It grounds you immediately. Getting some sunshine, even if I'm masculina figure, but getting some sunshine, getting some vitamin D, that's a great way to promote peacefulness for your central, and I say central nervous system, limbic system, because that really is the primary system that interacts with being pregnant when you're talking about these different emotions. And then I wrote down journaling. Instead of like, we have a habit of when we're nervous or worried, we speak about it, we talk about it, we keep reiterating it. I would say journal, because your emotions fluctuate from day to day, especially if you're pregnant. Right. Having a notepad, doing a little video journaling is necessary. Get it out of the system, but I wouldn't say put it in a way where you have to give it to somebody else and that person's going to now like, oh my God, you're right. Don't do that.
Yeah. So you guys can also do something that I'm very familiar with is the voice journaling. So if you're like me and you're like, I can't find the time to journal, no matter how hard I try to be committed as possible, I still can't pick up that pen and paper. And don't make yourself feel bad for not being able to. Don't make yourself feel as if you're not like a regular human for not being able to journal. It just means that your mind is a different realm.
Right.
And so if you can just pick up your note section of your phone, so if you have an iPhone, choose note. If you have an Android, there's no option.
Yes.
Just record what it is that you have to say. I find myself going back to my voice notes from like 2016 and honored at how much growth there's been.
Yes.
And the fact that that was something that was available for me.
Absolutely.
So not limiting myself to just the journaling aspect, but finding creative ways to still contribute to the journaling, but in a more technological way.
Absolutely. And this is the blessing of being this part of this generation, is that you have tradition and some innovation. You take what works for you and apply. And I think it's just the consistency, nothing technical. Journaling happens to be one of my favorite tools. You can put prompts, etc., etc.
Drawing sketches.
Right. Whatever. Or words, word association, things of that nature. Yeah. So I put that. For those people who are aware of what precious stones or crystals, I know that being like culturally sensitive to our community, it's not something that you're worshiping. Crystals have minerals. Yeah. Exactly. They're quartz. They have different properties, and there's certain minerals that you have that your body energetically responds to. So I wrote down a couple of good stones to have if you are the anxiety prone, if you are the type that feels definite tension in certain areas of the body, that despite no matter how much deep breathing or prayer, the physical body's just not responding to. Amethyst. Amethyst is an amazing stone to have. You can have a geode in your home. You can put it on a pendant. You can just hold it. It's wonderful how the body responds to being given something to calm down. And so you can use it either when you're going to sleep, again, if you're doing a morning meditation, however you feel called to work with it. Again, culturally competent for our platform. And I know because we work in community, our families have a big say-so, again, in the things that we incorporate into our lives. So you have to have information. And so I say there's a couple of great books that you can invest in, but they're really powerful. Again, I wrote also chrysocolla. That's a beautiful birthing stone. It's green. It's in the family of like green aventurine. Beautiful grounding stone. It promotes abundance. And abundance meaning like you feel centered. You feel abundant, like I am part of the great I am. Like I am able to encounter, take on, do all the things. You see how I'm sitting up? The reaction. Yeah, you gotta hold your core. 1 cent. You gotta hold your core. And then I wrote down rose quartz. Rose quartz is an amazing, all-encompassing, all-love stone. So it promotes gentleness. A lot of people say, oh, you're using that for attraction. Honestly, it's really about promoting the self-love for yourself. It's trusting yourself. Right. And one thing that people don't understand, and it's something that I flushed out entirely, so if you guys want to check out the audio series, it's about knowing your body. I feel like for us, I don't know about you, Shirley, but for me, one of the things that I didn't know, I didn't really pay attention to my physical being, my body. What I'm going to do, l'église, l'école, what's the other L? Lakai. All else. So, you know, you trust your school system to educate you and you're just, you know, coasting through sex ed. You don't have real women's wisdom-led type of understanding of your body until you're hitting birth. And I think that's such a hard pill to swallow in the midst of trying to have this core, this sense of control over your own body. So those stones are really, really, really beneficial. And the last thing that I wrote for stress management is supporting your limbic system through the use of essential oils. So, essential oils, again, c'est à cause de l'huile lacaille. As much as we use l'huile masculine, m'pas fin comprendre. Yeah, m'pas fin ka comprendre comment que moun ti jan anti or against or whatever. They're really, really beneficial, and each has their own chemical properties. Again, we don't have a lot of times. I feel like I'm racing through this, but we don't have a lot of time to get into how the chemical compounds react with individual bodies. So something that might work for you may not work for me, but it's good to try different kinds. So I wrote down the grounding ones, like lavender. I wrote down chamomile. I wrote down bergamot, and I wrote down cedarwood. And each are different grouped. Like the cedarwood is more of the, again, wood, but like the grounding element. The lavender is more of the floral element. So still both promote a calmness, but on different spectrums. Okay, like I wrote down the bergamot because it's one that it's similar to the core. It's great for strengthening the core, of making you feel strong, capable. It really balances out the solar plexus chakra. It really just strengthens it. And you don't have to put it on your skin. You can also just diffuse it. You can put it on your sheets. You can wash your sheets with them. I like to just put tea tree in my washer when I'm washing my clothes and the blankets for the kids because they're, you know, roughhousing. So there's different ways that you can support your limbic system so that you can get a good night's sleep. Super important in stress management, in pandemic society, in onslaught of information. These are very simple, holistic, affordable ways to self-nourish, self-protect, self-nurture, you know, if you're pregnant.
Those who one of my biggest pet peeves on social media, and I'll be a huge advocate for seeking self-care information from individuals who are not self-proclaimed experts, but necessarily trained experts.
Right.
And we'll always find it that, and I remember going to a self-care conference and saying, I'm kind of tired of seeing people saying that you need to go get a spa, you need to go get a massage. You have to spend like $150 in order to practice self-nurture, self-compassion, and self-care. When in reality, all the things that are related to self-care are either free or under $10.
Pretty much. And just to highlight for the quality of the oils, just make sure that they're therapeutic grade. Just make sure where you're getting your quality from. And I'm not here to push one or the other, but just make sure the quality of what you're getting. Because again, if you're putting it, and I use those particular oils for pregnancy just because they're sensitive and they're midwife approved. I'd like to say that. Just make sure. Also, like you just mentioned about the freeness of it, even going to the spa, I'm a spa head, I confess. I like deep tissue massages, but that doesn't work pregnant. No, I could tell you from experience, it's a waste of money. So pregnancy, it really is just making sure that you're controlling the level of stress, anxiety, exposure to those things. The last thing that I wrote in the category of self-worth, which is another aspect of the coping self, is to, again, self-advocate. So either you have a doula, again, each and every hospital system is going to look different, but in a regular setting, having a doula inform you, prepare you, and you having your own questions. Ask questions. Have the spouse engaged. I see a question that says, what message do you have for the fathers? What kind of support should he give his wife? Oh, okay. And I'll stop. Okay, cool. Okay, so when it comes to the self-worth, I think a lot of the times why we, particularly as Black women, is that we get shrouded. Like, we don't want to appear aggressive. We don't want to appear vulgar. We don't want to appear hostile. We want to appear polite. bien cambe is what I like to say. But the fact of the matter is, it's your health. You should know, you should be able to ask questions. Sou pas sentou bien, find a way to exprimer, parce que corps c'est pour vous lier. And that's one of the things that I wasn't prepared for, is being able to self-advocate and saying, hey, I'm not feeling good. Hey, I have polyhydramnios and my water weight is getting to be too much. So that's what I say to self-advocate. Ask the questions and also keep others informed. So if you're in an appointment ou sont pas confortable, text somebody. And this is not to put the providers on the spot because it might create an antagonistic relationship. But again, contextually speaking, for Black maternal health, Black maternal mental health, it's very important that you as the mother are communicating, finding people who are going to trust what you have to say before it's too late. So practice affirmations. How many of you, by the seat of the hearts, you know, when you're walking into an exam or you're walking into something where you have to self-advocate, l'estomac commence à fermer. Vous comprenez? Behind your knees start to get weak. Imagine being pregnant with those types of emotions. So practice the affirmations. I am part of the great I am. You know, however you can affirm yourself. I write affirmations all day long to remind myself que bon Dieu bon mon pouvoir pour m'exaucer voix et pas gagner pour rien sous la tête qui pour faire mes bouches. Not if I'm pregnant, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, so, and the last thing is examine your relationship with your provider. I think I said that. Is it one-to-one or is it a group? And if it's a group, please make sure that you meet or have access to all members in that group, that they all know your medical history, that they all know your vibe, because complications can ensue in that manner. So, yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned was about the self-awareness.
Yes.
And the self-advocacy. So I'm going to combine the two, and because I'm so familiar with our Caribbean population,
Yes.
I have to ensure that the women in our lives, where fathers and so anyone who's advocating on behalf of your
Yes.
make sure that we're very conscious of hiding our symptoms, which is something that is very easily done because we just want to avoid it.
Right.
Right. Making sure we're not hiding behind our symptoms just because we feel like we don't have any. I guess when you feel like you're not supported.
Yes.
By pill.
Shrinking. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So diminishing that feeling.
Yes.
Or whatever it is that you're feeling. So making sure that anyone on live can attest to making sure that we're not hiding behind the fear of birth or postpartum also.
Correct. That's on its own. Yeah. It's very, very important. And I think that sometimes we don't want to say anything. I want to go to the questions, but I think sometimes nous-mêmes, femmes enceintes, nous capables be quiet because you just want it to be over. Ou bien, ou ka pense que physicien compte plus passer ou même. And that's something que États-Unis get ça pour défaut. I'm sorry. And when you speak like that, it sounds like, oh, you know, we all, especially for this particular platforms, we have nurses, we have nurse practitioners, I have doctors in my family, we have them all. And la mentalité haïtienne en particulier, c'est comme si l'eau by critique ou insulter tout cœur moun. Et c'est pas ça, c'est système là qui est différent que la caille nous. Vous comprenez ça me dit? Pays c'est sous pas parler ou entraver. Et y a pas un sentiment avant. So you really have to be mindful that nobody knows you more than you. You can étudier quoi, mais c'est ou capoter quoi. So mutual respect is the thing that comes to mind. Mutual respect. Is really important. Really important.
I think that was a great power 30 minutes on what that experience is, how to basically overcome that initial disease and putting them with
right.
disease. So now I'm going to jump into the questions that they're about setting us up.
Okay.
Allow for you to answer some of those questions. So
okay.
What was your first sign that your experience was not supporting the system?
Ooh, what was my first sign? Okay, wow. Okay. Great question. First pregnancy, and I'll keep it succinct. I would say for my first pregnancy, I'm very, very transparent about my systemic experience. So being pushed to take medication and actually having nightmares and adverse reactions to the preeclampsia medication. So that's an experience of, like, let's say from the postpartum aspect, that me telling a doctor that I don't feel comfortable taking this was met with brute resistance. Like, c'est moi qui connais. Si vous parlez malade pour reste vie, prends médicament. So that was one example. So for the first pregnancy, I really advise you guys to get it, and it's on Amazon. Ebook copy, so you don't have to worry about transmission.
Like the hard copy.
That's right. But for my second pregnancy, wow. For my C-section, the power struggle. That was my first indicator. With it, I don't carry all the way full term. The linéage pas moi nous pas porter jusqu'à la fin. And I was told that nous pas porter importance avec sagesse grande qui en dehors. So moi dis en créole pour nous comprendre ça me dit nous. Vous comprenez ça me dit l'on insulter racine comme ça et puis son monde qui noir pareil that could be really crushing in terms of that patient provider relationship. You just basically told me that my grandmother's wisdom for our entire lineage t'a pas dit rien parce que c'est en dehors lié. Vous comprenez?
Right.
So that was my first experience. How do you think we should reach out to the community? I really think that doula piece is very important. I really think that connecting with doulas, because you want to make sure you have the right information. So here I am coming from the mental health perspective, and I'm always clear about that. I'm not a midwife. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not an OBGYN. I'm coming from the psychological, emotional, spiritual aspect. But for community awareness, I really think that doulas are that bridge piece where they understand the emotional, the physiological aspect of what's happening with the mother and the community, and also what's happening systemically. So I think that if you're gonna, let's say you are a mental health professional, or you're someone in your church, which is another space that I really feel like for Black people we're missing that type of awareness, is having programming. If someone wants to take on that, is introducing birth care and that experience into the church community. But doulas, to answer the question, doulas, I really advocate for that. Okay, but not everyone understands this information due to our roots and culture. How do you think we can get our women to embrace those new ways? We're not all éclairés. On comprend ça, dit chérie, très bien. And I think more of our stories. So pour moi, la communauté haïtienne, moi vraiment penser que it's time to have more dialogue. And it comes from a heritage of grand moun pa parle en pile. But again, we come from a different system. So, I had this issue when I was a school counselor, is that communication is that missing piece. So if you're living in a country that functions 99.9% off of communication, I think that's where we as Haitians and those of us who are born on American soil need to do the facilitating in terms of taking away the red tape, explaining, communicating our stories. That's the reason why I have the podcast, is to have those under the surface, those darker stories shared so that you can have an awareness. Am I answering the question?
We are finished.
Oh, okay. So I'm saying that it's really important that you, for those who are not éclairés, ça qui est éclairé, yo pas kebe information pour tête. Mais qui j'aime ta répondre. Pas faire sophistiqué. Nous-mêmes haïtiens, nous gen ça pour défaut. Ma parle avec nous clair. Nous gen ça pour défaut. Nous pas remettre comme si sous nous combat like it's public information. You're actually doing a disservice. So sous kono bagay, you see something, say something, right? That's what they say on our subway stations in New York. So plus que ou même connaît, you're not fear-mongering. You're not eliciting horrible experiences, or you're telling somebody that's exactly how it's going to go. But it's an awareness. Create spaces for awareness. That's how I would answer the question.
So what is the message you have for fathers? What kind of support should a father give?
Okay, I would say, number one, do not be afraid to speak. And it's vraiment important parce que, again, within the context of Black maternal health, Black families, not everybody sees us as the Huxtables, not everybody sees us as, Fresh Prince or Family Matters. People see us in context of being separated. So you always want to be able to, if you can, accompany your wife, your partner. Make sure that you are vocal. Make sure that you are present when you go to these appointments. If you're allowed to, ask questions. Même si son bagay insignificant, moi des questions. Montrer que vous fait partnership avec madame. Même si madame vous compte tout bagay, montrer établissement que gen garçon nan kay lan. E sa haisyen nou ye, I know that like with feminism and like independence, sa entrave nou ye, excusez. I know people are going to be really upset, but I don't care. 2 kids later, I can tell you that too much of the independence, too much of the I can do this all by myself, c'est lit entrave nous. Because we're alienating ourselves from community. And that partner piece is the community, even if it's a best friend. But in the context of a father, ou besoin by papa ou espace pour me des questions. Ou besoin by papa espace pour que li senti li involved.
And I definitely think that can work both ways. So
yes.
Making sure that the mother gives that permission.
Yes.
And the space to actually be involved and not necessarily saying or doing things that push them away from
correct.
involvement in childbirth.
Correct.
Really turn it, just like push the men off to the ringer.
Right.
Leave it to mom or grandma or aunt, whoever knows how to teach.
Right. Yeah, and it's really important, you know, because again, le contexte de plateforme ça, pour nous mêmes haïtiens, nous sommes une société matriarcale. Vous comprenez? So, maman, grand-mère, grand-grand, c'est nous qui potomit dans la caille nous. So it's like second nature to go to your mom or to go to your grandmother before nous entrer mariés. Vous comprenez? And that's something that I had to learn. I'm not embarrassed to say that in my own partnership, my husband can tell you I was very headstrong in saying, moi pral fè bagay yo, jan maman, but l'on entre nan espace avec docteur yo, l'on ap accouché, it's such an intimate experience que pour pas quitter papa involved pour moi des questions, it's kind of detrimental. And another thing, say it again? Say it again? Correct, and you took it right out of my mouth, is that when we hear the word advocacy, we think raging pit bull. That's not necessarily so. It's just being a present figure and letting the establishment, whatever. And when you say establishment, it doesn't mean everybody's coming for you. We're not here to say that every doctor, every hospital is horrible. No, we're not saying that. We are dispelling a myth that all black families are broken and we don't have any education and we can't, et cetera, et cetera. And it starts with giving the fathers space. I will also just say in markers of trauma, for mothers, I would say to be a bit gentle and to be a bit aware. And this is for the greater community. So like grandparents, friends, parents, to be sensitive and to be present for the fathers. Because I cannot tell you how much trauma my husband has endured between 2 children. And pour garçon sans foi, ou qu'on est dans la communauté par nous, c'est comme si yo pas parlé, yo pas crié, yo pas fait rien, c'est just stoic. It's totally unhealthy. And the repercussions, mental health, in terms of just the onslaught, not even anger, but just sadness, remorse, PTSD, the spouse, the partner, the husband shares as much of the experience, especially in the postpartum phases, as the mother does. So, support is what I would say, 100%. Get your support game up.